Chapter 126. Tens of minutes had passed since the start of the battle. SEI and the others were lying on the ground. They had been disarmed, their legs had been slashed, and they had lost the ability to fight. If it was only debris, they still had the possibility of winning. Indeed, stopping time was certainly troublesome. No matter how experienced a mercenary or adventurer might be in battle, if his weapons were lost, he wouldn't be able to use his full power. However, what was really troublesome was the man who accompanied Debris. If he hadn't been here, it would have been possible for SEI and the others to bridge the gap and achieve victory over Debris. Sarges and Virgo were still standing, but both of them had been unable to find an opening to attack before time was stopped. Do you understand now? This is the difference between those who are chosen and those who are not. There is an insurmountable difference between us. Why are you acting like you're so great? It's not you who's amazing. It's the ring. Hearing Debris bragging about his victory, Alfie wanted to at least retort back spitefully. She couldn't move her body anymore, so she could only move her mouth. But apparently, it was more effective than Alfie expected as she saw Debris' face become distorted with rage. Did you just insult me? Debris moved next to her in an instant and stomped on her back. Arg. I'm asking if a mere commoner just insulted me. Stomp, stomp, stomp. The girl's back, head, arms, and legs were being trampled on without any guilt or hesitation. ub.a.s.t.a.r.d. Gantz was enraged by the scene and he forced himself to stand up, picked up his axe, and swung it with all his might. This exceeded Debris' expectations, but he quickly disappeared to avoid the axe. However, Virgo Antic.I.P. aided his movement and flew forward to attack with her weapon. Eek! A flash of the sword said in front of Debris' face. Panicking, Debris stopped time and widened the distance between them. Virgo lost sight of him for only a moment, but she quickly found him again and turned around. It wasn't that Virgo was keeping up with the stopped time. She certainly lost sight of him. However, the difference in their base speeds was too great, so she could attack before he could take action. After fighting him for a while, it became obvious that while the ring was certainly a threat, Debris himself was not a big deal. In that case, she could place all of her bets on this. That's enough. Do you not care what happens to this young man? However, Virgo's movement was stopped by Debris A.S. Associate. The A.S. Associate was sitting next to SEI and had a knife at his neck. This was a threat. If anyone moved again, he would decapitate SEI. As a result, even though Sarges and Virgo could still fight, they couldn't make a move or do anything. Having secured his safety, Debris smiled victoriously and bashed Virgo in the face. Ugh! Ho, how dare you surprise me, even though you're just a worthless commoner. You too. Don't put me in danger, you useless piece of Traz.h. Plus Debris. H.I.T. his A.S. Associate out of irritation, then turned his gaze back to Virgo. Her cheek was slightly red because of the beating, but since their statuses were too different, there wasn't any swelling. She was staring at Debris with a sharp gaze. Debris clicked his tongue as if his mood was ruined by those eyes, but he immediately smiled unpleasantly once more. I don't like this. If you don't know what courtesy is, then I'll just have to educate you. Courtesy is very important, you see. Those who don't know it will have a hard time in the future. For your own sake, I'll teach it to you. You don't deserve any courtesy. In response to Virgo's words, Debris silently kicked her. Gantz clenched his fists so hard out of rage that they were bleeding. SEI felt helpless and angry that this situation had resulted from him being held hostage. Why? Why am I so weak? This is miserable. I want power, power to defeat this guy and protect everyone. Debris continued to raise his hand towards Virgo while stomping on Alfie. But despite this, the girl's attitude did not change. Instead, Debris reached the limits of his patience first. You need to have a better understanding of where your place is. Having said that, Debris placed his hand on Virgo's clothes and tore them off all at once. Her white skin was exposed and her underwear could be seen. However, even though Virgo felt embarrassed, her eyes continued to stare straight at Debris. Hey, what are you doing? What am I doing? Isn't it obvious? I'm going to educate her. It's an honor for a commoner to be embraced by an.o.blee like me. Debris grinned and raised Virgo's chin. He couldn't be stopped. N.O. body could move because SEI was being held hostage. Without hiding his despicable desires, Debris reached for Virgo's underwear. In that moment, the ceiling collapsed and a beauty in a red cloak descended from above. Huh. To think that there's a bass.e.m.e.nt in this place. Are you sure there's no mistake that this is the place? Yes, Master. This is the place that Sagittarius located. The embodiment of terror, who was also a peerless beauty, stood there, alongside the steel doll who was her follower. Rupaz looked around casually and widened her eyes in surprise upon seeing SEI. On the other hand, as the cause of her trauma was before her, Alfie's face became incomparably paler than ever before. Unlike when she first met Alfie, Rupaz was currently in disguise. She was wearing GLA.S.SES and had hidden her wings. However, as her face itself didn't change, she could still be recognized by people who knew her. What are you all doing here? Are you Rupaz-san? Why are you here? Oh, I had received a request from the innkeeper. I don't really care about the reward, but he looked kind of worried and was distracted while cooking. It seemed to be a waste of his talent, so I came to find a solution. SEI was stunned by her response and wondered what in the world he was fighting for. Even though SEI and his friends had been desperately chasing evil, did she come here merely because she wanted to eat something delicious? Libra, who had moved away in the meantime without anyone noticing, returned to Rupaz with a woman whose face had been burned. Master, she seems to be the target. Her features match the description. Rupaz narrowed her eyes coldly as she examined the burned face and then looked at SEI's wounds. Her eyebrows lowered in displeasure when she saw Alfie's awful condition. But there wasn't really a significant change at this point. The atmosphere changed drastically when she saw Virgo with her underwear exposed. All expressions vanished from Rupaz's face. At that moment, SEI no, everyone in that place who knew Rupaz had the feeling that they were going to be killed. Even Libra, who wasn't able to feel fear, became alert against her master. The change was just that drastic. For now, I'll like to hear about it. Did you do all these? Huh? Who are you? Isn't your attitude rather big after showing up so suddenly? Ignorance is truly scary. It seems that you don't even know who I am. I have absolutely no idea. Debris' expression changed after hearing Rupaz's remark that seemingly made fun of him. However, he immediately smiled smugly once more and spoke pretentiously. On the other hand, SEI was paralyzed with fear so much that he couldn't even speak, but he was desperately shouting in his heart. Stop it. Don't provoke her any further. Apologize now and beg for forgiveness. Otherwise, you'll be killed. However, Debris didn't doubt that he had the advantage. He didn't notice that he was stepping on a nuclear weapon, let alone a landmine, no, a star before an imminent explosion. Well, whatever. Rejoice. I appoint you as my toy. Despite your attitude, you look good. You're suitable for me to play with. Master, let's kill this thing. Wait, Libra. I haven't heard his answer yet. Considering what I'm about to do, a simple apology would be unacceptable if I got the wrong person. Therefore, I have to verify the truth. Rupaz didn't take any action other than question Debris again without showing any signs of anger. So, are you responsible for this? Oh, yes. I educated her a little since she dared to speak against me. That woman, she burned her own face without my permission because she hated being embraced by me. Isn't that so rather pretentious? Another question. Virgo, the flugel over there. Are her bruises and clothes also your doing? What about it? She dared to make me feel a bit of fear. This is merely her retribution. This is amazing. It's like the type of lower life forms you see in books, and it's even the kind that's particularly despicable. Rupaz spoke in a straightforward manner regarding Debris. Wasn't this man named Debris the archetype of despicable and bless? For him to be this rotten, it was impressive in its own way. In a sense, this was a kind of compliment from Rupaz. But Debris was evidently displeased by her words as he drew his sword. It seems you need to be educated as well. Time stopped. Channeling mana into the ring would stop the time of this world. Everyone, except for Debris, would become sculptures. The Ring of Time, which was said to have been once given to the hero Alioth to defeat the Black-Winged Overlord, was invincible. If he could stop time, he would win, no matter who his opponent was. This woman who suddenly appeared was no exception. For now, he would peel off her clothes. He couldn't wait to see her relaxed face collapse in shame. While thinking such despicable thoughts, Debris reached out to Rupaz, his arm was grabbed and the flow of time was restored. Oh, that's surprising. You can move at this speed even at your level? Or is it some kind of trick? Wah, eh. Oh, I see. It's this ring. It seems like a powerful item. Rupaz, who casually entered the stopped time, spoke in a tone as if she didn't even notice that time had stopped. Indeed, she truly didn't realize it. For her, stopping time was just a phenomenon that occurred naturally whenever she moved seriously. It was a trivial thing for her as the world stopped simply because it couldn't catch up to her speed. Therefore, Debris time stop effect was simply high-speed movement in Rupaz's eyes. For monsters at her level, it was only a natural phenomenon. Stopping time didn't even constitute a skill for her. It was simply an ordinary movement. Rupaz removed the ring from Debris' hand and examined it. The sacred artifact, Chronos. It's quite a big deal. Upon activation, it reduces the speed of the world by 10,000 for a few seconds. It can effectively stop time, huh? But this is defective, I give it back. Well, wait a bit. We need to settle some things first. Rupaz smiled gently and raised her fist. Using blunt edge strike, her steel-like fist smashed into Debris' face at supersonic speed. Debris' nose broke and started bleeding as he was being blown away, but Rupaz grabbed his head and forcefully pulled him back. Oops. Don't faint yet, brat. The punishment is only starting. Rupaz laughed like a wild beast eyeing her prey and activated coercion. In an instant, everyone was salted by a heavy pressure as if the sky itself had fallen. Merely stopping the time of the world was not even worth mentioning. Suppressing the entire area with just her presence was a talent that truly befitted a king. The world itself seemed to fear Rupaz's presence as coercion's pressure was so great that it even physically cracked the floor. However, SEI and the others barely took any damage as she demonstrated fine finesse in controlling the shockwave that cracked the floor. Eek. At this point, Debris finally understood. He was the one who was ignorant. He finally realized that he had picked a fight with a ridiculous monster. And Debris thought, again. I'm being looked down upon again. I'm being ridiculed again. I don't want to be looked down upon anymore. I don't want to go back to that time anymore. Debris Speth was abandoned as a filthy orphan in front of a church. He grew up without knowing his parents' faces and voices. His body was weak and he had no magical talent. As a result, he was ridiculed by the people around him every day. Useless Debris. Incompetent Debris. Those were his nicknames. He had never once been praised and was constantly being looked down upon as garbage. But one day, his life was completely changed. When he learned that he was actually An.O.Bli's son who was kidnapped and then abandoned by the desperate criminal in front of the church, he literally jumped for joy. Yes, I'm actually An.O.Bli. I'm different from those commoners. However, his happiness lasted only for a while. As An.O.Bli, he was treated with scorn by his peers for being raised as an orphan. That was why he pretended to be strong in order to not be looked down upon. He must rise above the others. I don't care. Rupaz's fist smashed into Debris' face again. Ugh, ha. Why did you suddenly start monologuing about your past even though you weren't asked about it? Did you think that having a tragic past would erase whatever you have done? Honestly, I don't care about your past. As far as Rupaz was concerned, Debris past was no different from dog poo that was left on the roadside. An orphan? Being looked down upon? Why should she care? This guy had laid his hands on Virgo, thereby making himself an enemy. That was all that mattered. Besides, she didn't like the way he did things. I can abuse people because I had a tragic past? Ridiculous. N.O. Bless had duties A.S. associated with their stations. N.O. Bless existed not to abuse the commoners, but to protect and govern them. I have done many bad things and took many lives. I have burned and destroyed my opponents. I won't deny that. But if someone plays around with his subjects' misfortunes, he is no longer a N.O. Blee. He's just a SCU bag who has authority. Within Ruppas, her emotions disappeared at an alarming speed, leaving behind only the ruthlessness of the black-winged overlord. I really don't like him. In that case, there was no need to hold back. There was only one thing to do. Blunt Edge Strike was activated, and she bashed him with all her might. Bash. Bash, bash. Bash, 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 bash. Bash, 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 bash. Ruppa's fist mercilessly landed on Debris at the rate of over 100 million punches per second. Head, face, chest, shoulders, arms, knees, belly, legs, S.H.I plus NS, and T.E.S.T.I.C.L.es. Every part of his body was crushed. Incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. All of the teeth in his mouth were broken. His jaws were broken as well. His eye sockets and eye.A.L.L.s were crushed. But the fist did not stop. The skull, facial bones, back bones, chest bones, and ribs. The shoulder bones, collar bones, upper arm bones, forearm bones, wrist bones, and hip bones. The pubic bone, thigh bones, kneecaps, calf bones, and foot bones. Every part of his body was completely destroyed. It was an unreasonable scene where a punch that could crack a planet in a single hit was forcibly mitigated to leave 1 HP behind due to the skill's effect. Debris Mental Fort.I.Tude was incinerated in an instant by the severe pain, but he couldn't die because of the skill's effect. Get lost, you lowlife. When Ruppa's consecutive attacks were finally over, there wasn't any part of Debris' body that remained unharmed. His body was barely keeping its humanoid shape even with the skill's effect. The lump of meat that couldn't even scream took the final hit and was blown away dramatically. But immediately after, Ruppas grabbed his head and pulled him back. As long as Blunt Edge Strike was active, he wouldn't die from Ruppa's attacks. However, the skill wasn't smart enough to account for other factors. For example, if Ruppas didn't grab him, Debris would have been blown away over a distance proportional to the power generated by several 100 million punches per second. Ruppas herself couldn't be sure where he would end up. Perhaps, he might be blown into S.P.A.C.E. and die there. Ruppas threw Debris away gently, but even though she did it gently, it was still done by someone with an exceptional arm strength. Debris crashed into a wall, sinking several meters into it as if he was digging a tunnel before he finally stopped. This casual action was like throwing trash that was picked up from the ground into a garbage bin. It was just a casual gesture, but the phenomenon that resulted from it was completely unreasonable. Having seen such an overwhelming scene, the face of Debris A.S. Associate turned pale and he realized their chance of victory was completely zero. After completely destroying the human called Debris, Ruppas added, "Don't worry, I was using Blunt Edge Strike, hold back. Use the little time you have left to regret what you've done." How exactly was this holding back? While thinking so, SEI and the others raised their pale faces to look at Ruppas. TLN, I apologize beforehand, but this chapter is probably a little hard to understand if you're young or not used to English. The author's explanation of the skill is unnecessarily convoluted and long-winded. So when I translated that, even though I tried to make it simple, it still feels like a simple journal article. That's another way of saying, it makes sense but it's still a pain to read and comprehend. I included a simplified explanation at the end of the chapter for those that are confused. Currently, in front of me, there was the appearance of a man who was in a seize position, or rather, forced to be in a Caesar position too. He was a weak uncle-like man who was serving the guy called Debris or something, the N.O.Blee who was doing that stupid thing until just a moment ago. He was prostrating and looking downcast after having his face beaten to a pulp. It was quite a disgusting scene where his nether regions were completely stained and there was a puddle under his feet. Perhaps I went a little too far? By the looks of it, it seems like he's just a normal person who doesn't really have any power. Although, because of what I had heard, I was aware that he was merely executing the orders due to the difference in social standing, so I had pulled my punches back quite a fair amount. Notwithstanding, this was still the aftermath. Even though I just lightly slapped him. Well, how do I put this? Let's just say that he did help out in doing bad things and that because of his actions, there were quite a lot of people that didn't manage to get away, so, let's just say it's just retribution. As a side note, the guy called Debris or something was healed up just enough to an extent that he wouldn't drop dead spontaneously, therefore, even though it was barely, he was still alive and breathing. I emphasize on just enough so that he won't die. After all, if he were to be fully healed, we did not know what he might start doing. Therefore, he still barely maintained his original shape and did not become an unknown or unrecognizable object. Additionally, although it was to be expected, I had already confiscated his ring and had no plans to return it to him. A knife to a fool like an iron club to an ONI3 it was because nothing good would come out of it even if I were to return it to him. Afterwards, the wounds on all of the female victims were healed up and Dina was also called upon to erase their memories of everything that had conspired in this place. After all, it was unlikely that there were any memories they would have wanted to keep. Although something similar had happened in the past, now that I thought about it, it seemed those orcs could be considered gentlemen in comparison to Debris. In other words, Debris was an existence that was below that of orcs. Needless to say, Virgo's clothes were also repaired. Do you swear to make up to the victims from now on? Yes, I swear. Good. But never show your face in front of these victims. There's a risk of their memories coming back. You are to aid them from the shadows. Do I make myself clear? It seemed the man, who was an A.S. associate in a countless number of Debris' evil doings, had an aching heart as he promised to live to make up for everything that he had done. It was not as if everything would be forgiven once a person were to regret his actions. However, depending on the perspective, he himself was also one type of victim who could not refuse Debris' orders due to his status. Therefore, I would not go as far as wanting to kill him outright. I also felt that it was pitiful for the Speth family to be brought down along with the criminal. I mean, if the Speth family's evil deeds were to come to light, the family would definitely be ruined to the bone. Some the truth of what had happened would soon reach the ears of the royal family via Gantz and the elf Nasan, so they would officially have their N.O.ability revoked. Okay, are you able to stand? Yes. I'm fine. I got the brown-haired girl who was still leaning on the side of the wall to stand up and cast a recovery divine magic onto her. Even though she was done in quite badly, with this, there should not be any scars left. To go this far against a young girl, that B.A.S.T.A.R.D called Debris was quite a rotten individual as a man. Just look, she's shaking this much from fear. Maybe I should punch him 100 more times. Well, whatever. Punishment will come chasing later on, after all. Anything more than this is just kicking a corpse. I've intruded. I'm done with what I wanted to do. I'll leave the rest to your discretion. I decided to leave the rest to the hero's party and quickly leave this place behind. Of course, the woman called Rael, who was the target of the request, was also with us. The burn mark on her face was also healed up perfectly. Divine magic is super convenient. Rupasama. What kind of an item is that ring? Whilst we were returning, Libra inquired about the mechanics behind the ring. In all likelihood, she became curious after hearing me call it a defective item. In response, I answered her without holding back any information. The effect of the ring is as I previously said already. But if the speed of the entire surrounding area was to be decreased by 10,000, even the user themselves would stop. So the ring forcibly hastens the wearer's time just enough to be able to counter that decrease in 10,000 speed until it feels like time has stopped for everyone else but them. Then, yeah. For someone like me who's already in that realm in terms of speed, it'll be no problem. But he wasn't like that. Even then, as long as he was wearing the ring, the time said would be absorbed by the ring itself. But I'm sure you can guess what happens once he loses that ring, can't you? The effect of the ring was a debuff against the whole world and a buff to the user themselves to counter that debuff. In terms of a number, it was 10,000. It dropped the speed of everything in the world to 0, effectively stopping time itself. Although it sounded unbelievable, the ring was applying a debuff on the concept of time. However, because the debuff was also applied on the wearer themselves, thereby stopping the time of the user, it counteracted the debuff by forcibly compensating the wearer with just enough speed to where they could increase their flow of time enough to be able to break free from the speed debuff. I see, it's definitely quite an unfair effect. So much so that if there wasn't a demerit to it, I would have wanted the 12 stars to use it. However, when there came a time the ring were to be lost, all of the time that had said would come flowing back to the former user all at once. Therefore, it was an extremely defective product. Needless to say, it was not just a simple and soft-hearted effect akin to, the wearer was in the world where time had stopped for 5 seconds, so they lived for 5 more seconds compared to everyone else. It conferred a demerit far worse than that. It was said that the ordinary speed at which humans walked was approximately 5 kilometers per hour. Since that N.O.Blee was an individual from this world, he possessed physical abilities greater than that of a person back on Earth. However, it still would not have said 30 kilometers per hour. Unilaterally stopping time, in other words, in this world where individuals at the level such as Bennett Nash and I were at, the amount of speed adjustment which would be needed to actualize the phenomenon of leaving everything else behind in time is, well, because I've never really measured it, I'm not 100% sure, but in the state where my perception of time is dilated and I felt like running or flying at full speed, I would, in fact, be able to lap around Midgard at least once before 1 second of real time had said. Basing my judgment on that, it's not a bad deduction to think that the speeds of Bennett Nash and I are over Mach 100,004 because the numbers have gotten too big. All of this sounds like a joke, but let's leave that thought aside for now. The main point is what comes after that. I've heard that Mach 1 is approximately 1,200 kilometers per hour. Although, because it's affected by pressure and the temperature of the medium, there might be a slight deviation, so it's just an approximate figure. And, calculating it based on these figures, for an individual that has a speed of 30 kilometers per hour to be able to Serpa.s someone moving and operating at Mach 100,000, their own speed would have to be multiplied by 4,000,000. In other words, 4,000,000 seconds would have said for each second of time the N.O.Blee stopped, rewording that, approximately 46 days of his lifespan would be spent in a flash. If he were to only use it a few times, although it came with a vicious price to pay, it wouldn't be something that he wouldn't be able to afford. If 10 seconds of time were to be stopped, it would mean that he would have spent over a year's worth of time, but it may still be considered within an acceptable range. But what if it was repeated multiple times? What happens when a few seconds of time was stopped every time it was used and it was used repeatedly? If 1 minute's worth of time was to be stopped, he would have spent over 7 years' worth of his lifespan. If a grand total of 10 minutes worth of time was to be stopped, over 70 years' worth of his lifespan would have been used. And by the looks of things, that spoiled brat had relied quite heavily on this ring. I'm not sure how many times he had used it up until now, but, well, if my predictions were correct, by now, he would have turned into a geezer. Actually, I guess if he can end up only as a geezer and nothing more, it's still a good result? To sum things up, it was pretty much no different from being asked to abandon the future for a moment of immediate victory. 5 The only ones who would be able to use the ring without any demerits were me, the Demon King and Bennett Nash, but how would we even put it to use? I suppose it'd be interesting to use it as material for a golem, maybe? If it's the current me, it wouldn't even be a dream for me to create a golem which is at a higher level than Libra. Well, it doesn't change the fact that it's still a defective item, but it's not like there's absolutely no way to make use of it. I suppose I'll just keep it on me for now. After we got back to the inn, the innkeeper subjected us to over-the-top grat.I.tude. He must have been worried about the woman called Rael to this degree. Needless to say, we did not convey everything that had transpired at that location. We only informed him that after she was kidnapped, she was put to sleep. After all, it was a fact that she was not violated, therefore, technically, it was not a lie. Anyways, let's put all of that aside. What was important at the time was the food. In front of me were steaming, luxurious and beautifully presented dishes. Although I felt there were too many dishes, considering that we also had quite a few people on our side, we would probably be able to finish it all. I selected one from amongst the many dishes and picked it up with my hand. It was a giant bone covered in meat and well cooked right down to the inside. Manga meat, so it actually exists for real. When I gnawed it off, the meat's succulent flavor overflowed within my mouth. Its flavor was something that I was not familiar with. Although it was a little hard, the meat had the right texture and was pretty nice overall. It tasted a little like chicken meat, however, it was definitely something else. As I was enjoying the taste with every bite that I took, I suddenly pictured a dragon-looking creature with wings in my head. At the same time, what I saw was a memory of a scene where Ruppaz from the olden times was camping with young and immature-looking individuals such as Migraz, the late Alioth, Mizar, and the others. Near them was a corpse of a subjugated pseudo-dragon, cooking under a fire. Ah, so, that's a pseudo-dragon, huh? We might call it a fake one, but it was still the first time we were eating a dragon. So the taste of a pseudo-dragon is actually pretty similar to that of a chicken? I mean, I'm definitely not discontented with it. I actually quite like this flavor. If there was something like mayonnaise, I think it'd go quite well together. As I was thinking about such a thing, I enjoyed the hour having lunch. However, it all came to an end when suddenly, at that moment, Dina stood up. What's wrong, Dina? I need to go wash my hands. Ah, she needs to go to the toilet, huh? After watching Dina's back as she hurriedly went away, I went back to biting at the pseudo-dragon meat. But this time, I was stopped again when Castor suddenly stood up by kicking his chair away. What? Do you need to go to the toilet too? That was what I thought. However, Castor's expression at the time was the very definition of dead serious. He was covered in sweat and donned a very grim facial expression that I had never seen him have before. He's holding it back. Well, actually, that doesn't actually seem to be the case. This feeling, is it Pollux? But, how can it be? There's no way she would leave and go outside of the land of the fairies. Pollux? If I recalled correctly, that was the name of the younger sister from the twins. According to Parthenos's story, I had heard that the twins were fulfilling the duties of sealing an Ouroboros. However, Castor certainly did not appear to be doing that. In the first place, the very fact that he was here was strange. Therefore, it could naturally be inferred and determined that the one who was sealing the Ouroboros was the younger sister of the two. And from the looks of it, it seemed something had happened to her. Castor subsequently ran straight outside and the rest of us were just left behind quite anticlimactically. Well, yeah, it's that, you know. I guess we should chase him for now. Asterisk. Well, she certainly came in like a storm. After Ruppaz left, Sarjas earnestly muttered such words and everyone else was inclined to agree. Even an item which was terrifying to them was nothing more than a defective product to Ruppaz. Even an enemy who was a strong opponent for SEI and the rest was nothing more than a weak old man from Ruppaz's point of view. In all likelihood, Ruppaz had not even noticed that the man, who was still in a Caesar position even at that very moment, was one of the top-tier warriors amongst the humanoids. No, in the first place, it was questionable whether she even conceived him to be a warrior at all. For her, the comparison of the difference between an ordinary person and Debris was the same as that of an ant and a slightly stronger than normal ant. There was no way she could even distinguish the difference between the two. The light slap, which was similar to if she was affectionately patting a small lovable animal, had caused the head of Debria's subordinate to fling left and right and then immediately swell up. This scene caused everyone still present at the time to become terrified and leak a weird-sounding laugh. Since he was young, SEI had always questioned the concept of you can't run away from the boss in games. However, the reason for that mystery had now become apparent. Yeah, it's definitely impossible. You can't run away from that. The realm that they live in is different. To have your neck grabbed the moment you start running away, there's really nothing you can do. I'm so pathetic. SEI muttered quietly and looked at his own hands. He was aware that he was weak. But even then, he had not considered or thought about it too seriously. This was because Ruppas and the rest were definitely over the top. Comparing oneself to a tornado, an earthquake, or a meteor and thinking that oneself was weak was natural. There was no one who would give thought to something like that seriously. Ordinarily, one would not go about thinking, the sun is so big and strong, so why am I this weak? But today was different. He was made to learn. After being faced with the reality that he could not even reach the foot of another human being similar to himself, he was forced to realize how weak and pitiful he was. It was a disgraceful scenario where, let alone being unable to save a person from someone full of evil intentions, he himself was turned into a hostage. At that moment, above everything else, he could not forgive his own weakness. He had wanted to become stronger more firmly than he had ever wished for. The method was right in front of his eyes. If, somehow, he was to be given the golden apple that only Ruppas could make, he could easily become one of the top-tiered talents, even in this world. But was that really the right thing to do? Was it not just far too simple? Rup-Himon, I want to become strong here, have some golden apples, yay, I'm level 1000 now 7. Was that really what it meant to be strong? Could one really be proud that they had gotten stronger that way? After gaining strength in such a simplistic and irresponsible way, could he really keep himself from becoming impudent and arrogant? Did he have the confidence that he would not become like that Debris guy? There was nothing worse in corrupting a person than a power that was simply handed to them. In that sense, the golden apple was truly the forbidden fruit. It was something that provided the temptation for people to go off track. I want to become stronger. That was how SEI felt from the bottom of his heart. Nonetheless, he still hesitated to reach his arms out to grab the golden apple. Truth be told, this was the reason he had never brought up the topic about the golden apple in Ruppas's presence. It was not anything special. It was simply that he was scared about making a mistake. He was fearful that he would step off track once he gained power. Mistakes were frightening. Once he went off track, it was not just his own life but the lives of others that he would destroy. Furthermore, the greater the power that he possessed, the bigger the collateral damage he would cause from his mistakes. As an extreme example, even if the current SEI made a mistake and accidentally smashed the ground with all of his might, at most, only a small part of the ground would be shaved off. However, if Ruppas were to do the same thing, it would cause unimaginable damage to the surroundings. It could even make the planet crack in two. It was the very fact that he, as a single individual, would gain the power to decide the fate of even the world. There was no way the pressure of that would be light. There was no way he could think lightly of it. If he were to be given that much power, would he be able to use it correctly? Did he have the qualifications for it? Faced with those questions, SEI did not know the answer. SEI don't know, is anything wrong? No, nothing. Although Kinko looked up with his round eyes and prompted SEI feigned that there was nothing wrong. SEI then silently moved the stupid dog peeing on Debria's face away from Debris and told it not to pee on someone's face, before turning to face Alfie. I'm sorry. That I wasn't able to be of much help. What are you saying? If you weren't there, I'd have been caught in that dark alley and I don't even know what I'd be subjected to by now. I'm really thankful for everything, SEI. Alfie displayed a warm smile and extended her gratitude towards SEI. She then looked away, which was also followed by SEI looking away. They must have had things they wanted to say to each other, however, neither of them could muster up their convictions. Eventually, however, she picked herself up and looked directly towards SEI. So, you know, only if you're fine with it, or more like, if everyone is fine with it. I know it sounds like a lot to ask for, but I would like to be included in the journey together with. It happened as Alfie was fidgeting and asking bashfully. The stupid dog that was getting bored and looking for something to do decided to attach itself onto Sarge's. Unfortunately, due to its momentum, Sarge's robe slid off. And what appeared from underneath was a spider. As soon as she saw his appearance, Alfie turned pale and stopped speaking. She already understood that Sarge's was not a bad person. If anything, they had even fought together with each other and she had a favorable impression of his personality. She certainly did not hate him. Yes, she did not hate him. However, as a human, it was unavoidable to have irrational fears that they could not stand. There existed those who could not stand the sight of AC.O.C. Crouch however much they tried, and there were those who could not stand spiders. In other words, that was just how it was. For Alfie, she just simply could not stand the appearance of a spider. It was just something irrational that she could not help fearing. It had nothing to do with whether it was harmful or not. For example, it was not a problem about whether it possessed venom or not. It was just that, somehow, she could not stand how it looked. Just by looking at it, she would get goosebumps and would not be able to stop sweating. I'm sorry. Please forget what I just said. Just like this, the flag which was almost raised collapsed in a flash. Author note, Alfie is looking towards us like she wants to become part of the group. Sarge's, this is my real handsome appearance. Alfie ran away. Sarge's, sorry. SEI just cannot raise a flag labeled girl, merciless, author note end, TLN, press F for SEI, again, JKS since the author's explanation of the mechanics behind the ring sucks, so much so that even the editors can't fully understand it. Here is the simplified explanation of the Ring of Time, even though I also butchered it. 1. User activates the ring. 2. The ring places a worldwide -10,000 speed debuff. No units are given by the author, but from the context, it's probably AGI. Agility/speed, including to the user itself. Hence it effectively slows everything down that it feels like time stopped. 3. The ring gives the user the buff, hastens the user's flow of time until they feel like they're matching the normal flow of time, to counter the debuff on them. Hence the user is the only one that feels normal time whilst everyone else is slowed down. 4. As long as the user has the ring equipped, the time PAS.SED for the user is calculated in real time. I.e. time stopped for the real time equals 1 second and the time flowed for the user equals 1 hour. The ring stores 59 minutes 59 seconds and the user ages 1 second. Where the time PAS.SED is calculated with the perception of the 10k speed stat as the base, i.e. people like Ruppes/Bennett/ORM. 5. When the user takes off the ring, all of the stored time flows back to them. Using the previous example, when the user takes off the ring, they will age further by 59 minutes 59 seconds worth, totaling up to the full 1 hour. Hence footnote SIX estimatobacco. 6. Ruppes is saying that anyone with an AGI stat of 10,000 or above, like her, does not suffer the detrimental effect but the ring itself becomes useless to them, since they can do the same thing the ring does without actually using the ring. Therefore, in her mind, the ring is defective. If you play games, the whole mechanic can be summed up with the ring artificially creates freeze frames. On a separate but more serious note, I am not sure that I am fully satisfied with the ending for the failure of an existence, but given the otherwise light-hearted nature of this series as a whole, I will say it was a fitting end for him. Personally, I am not too satisfied with the bittersweet ending for the victims as it is by no means positive. However, I appreciate the author giving us a realistic and believable solution, even though I also don't appreciate the author making such a two-dimensional character in the first place. As was discussed on our Discord server, erasing their memories and rewinding time were really the only two viable solutions for the victims, as once the act was committed, there really is no way to remedy the horrific experience. In any event, now that the S.H.I pluster, debris failure of an existence, has been F.U.C.KED and shoved down the bin into irrelevance, we will finally go back to the main storyline and they go back to being light-hearted. Please look forward to it. Ruppas and 3 of 7 Heroes flashback. I think the image is from Volume 3, __1. The speed of sound is 1234.8 km per hour or 767.269 miles/h. Lightning, Mach 440, is 543,321 km per hour or 337,598 miles/h. Just went on a tangent and researched it a little, but I'd say it's a little weird in terms of numbers. I feel like even if you consider the medium that it's traveling through, it seems quite fast for a leader and a bit slow for a return stroke. So I'm just going to say I don't know ____/, author is probably right and move on. Edit, it seems Naturoforum also used Mach 440 for the speed of lightning at one point. 2. So, what's the Caesar position in English, yoga position? But yeah, it's like this, https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Caesar. Caesar 3 in ONI is a creature from J.A. Payne's folklore. The closest English equivalent would be an ogre. They're usually depicted with an iron club/metal club in their hand. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/ONI. ONI for Mach 100,000 equals 123,480,000 km per hour, 34,300 km per second, or 76,726,915 miles/h. As a reference, the speed of light equals 874,030 Mach equals 1079,252,244 km per hour. 299,792 km per second, or 676,254 miles/h, i.e. at least 11.44% of the speed of light. 5. The Ring is pretty much a grim version of J.A. Payne's folklore, Uras.H.I plus Mataros to Matabako. In that series, the man travels into a place where time flows at a different rate. When he left the place, he was given a chest and was told not to open it. When he opened it, all of the said time flowed back to him all at once and turned him into an old man. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/uras.h.I plus ma_tar% c5% 8d. 6. Like this, Forced Smile 1 Dina Dina, Alba Manga Forced Smile 1 Duchess 50Ts 7 Reference to Doraemon, Ruppas plus Doraemon equals Ruppemon. Doraemon has a magic pocket, it's a pocket, right? Maybe pouch, W/E, where he can pull out, air, stuff. And because it's one of those kids shows, you ask him for something and he just comes up with some convenient stuff. I'm pretty sure the author's A.N.A.logicing that N.O.Bita, the main character, in the Doraemon show is handed the most convenient thing from Doraemon just because he asked for it. It's pretty much saying that he doesn't deserve it. Though, the author did go roundabout in giving that A.N.A. and didn't expressly state it. ___. Chapter 128, Pollux used the Dragon King Raw link, October 30, 2016, translator, Tumorfreethoughts/TPSTT, November 19, 2019, editor 1, Hand of Vecna, December 11, 2019, editor 2, Key, December 11, 2019, translation link, __. So this chapter is written like, air, as Vecna would describe it, like how Yoda talks. Author always writes like how Yoda talks, but this chapter was particularly bad. The sentences don't connect too well and in my opinion, it's too fragmented so it doesn't flow properly. It's a real pity because the content itself is not that bad. __________ ha, ha. In the sky away from the land of the fairies, a pair of demons, a man and a woman, were flying desperately. No, the expression that two of them were flying was not the correct way to describe what was happening. It was more correct to say that the man, Terra, was carrying Luna and flying by himself. There was a big difference in level between Terra and Luna. Therefore, rather than for Luna to fly herself, it was significantly faster for Terra to carry her and fly. Needless to say, it did not allow Terra to reach his top speed. Furthermore, a terrifying pursuer was closing in on him from behind. Its length was 170 m. Its weight, 180,000 tons. Its whole body was enveloped in jet black scales, and every time its giant wings flapped, it caused a storm just from the motion. Individually, its giant neck was already majestic and unparalleled, yet there were 10 of them in total. As each of its necks was enough to rival 10 ordinary dragons, it was nicknamed the dragon which possessed 100 heads in the past. It was a monster which should no longer have existed in this time and age. It was an existence which should have been subjugated over 200 years ago. Historically, it dominated a quarter of the world and was a feared existence which stood at the pinnacle of the dragon race that embodied what it meant to be the strongest. It was an existence which stood alongside the vampire princess, the Lion King and the Demon King as the 4 strongest individuals. Until the moment Rupasmaffel came and subjugated it, it was a tyrannical king which flaunted its T.I.Tle as unrivaled in power. The Dragon King Loden won a monster which should have long perished from this world, yet currently, it was undoubtedly in this world and was releasing a mighty roar. And riding on that, was the fairy princess Pollux, looking down on Terra and Luna with an icy stare. Terra-sama. I'll be the bait, so please just leave me and run. That's not going to happen. You wouldn't even be enough to become bait. But for now, just grab onto me tightly. Pollux's rampage was a total miscalculation on the part of Terra. As for the reason why it had turned out this way, Terra was somewhat able to understand the situation thanks to the last few words Pollux had shouted. The G.O.Dis had interposed one way or another and was currently controlling Pollux. If that was not the case, even if she was the fairy princess, she would not be able to summon and control the Dragon King. Indeed, if it was her ability, it was not impossible to reanimate the Dragon King. However, her ability was to summon a hero. On the other hand, the Dragon King was a destroyer and an existence which stood at the polar opposite of such heroes. Therefore, the prerequisite was not fulfilled. At the very least, it was very hard to believe that Pollux would recognize that existence to be a hero. Furthermore, even assuming that she was able to successfully summon him, she should not have been able to command him. If the legends were true, the Dragon King Loden was more tyrannical of a king even compared to the Lion King Leon. It did not have the disposition to listen to what others had to say. Notwithstanding that, it was being controlled by Pollux as if it had absolutely no self-consciousness of its own. In Midgard, there was only one Ent.I.Tai which could make such a thing possible. Exactly, to actualize such a thing, only the creation G.O.Dis Alovenus was capable of that feat, and her goal was most likely to defeat Rupasmaffel. In order to make that possible, she had moved her strongest chess piece that she could currently reach. Pitiful child of the demon race. Cease your needless resistance and settle down quietly. I do not really have the intention to kill you. If you would only come to my hand as one of the cards against ORM, I shall guarantee your safety. That's a good offer. But sadly, I doubt I'd even be enough to serve as a hostage against my father. No, that is not exactly the case. Borrowing Pollux's mouth, something other than Pollux spoke. Its tone was soft and, without any particular reason, induced a sense of comfort in the listener. However, Terra possessed a conviction that the only thing at the end of entrusting themselves to that sense of comfort was destruction. Her words put one's heart at ease. Just like a mother singing a lullaby to a child, it erased the sense of caution. That was scarier to him than anything else. Furthermore, if he and Luna were caught now, he would no longer be able to face Pollux, who was likely to be desperately fighting back. Fighting back, yes, she was still resisting. If that was not the case, they would have already been, in particular, Luna would have already been erased. As the demon race was arcane magic used by the G.O.Dis, it would be easy for her to erase them. However, she was unable to do that. Furthermore, she wanted to obtain Terra as a means of a threat against his father. This signified that she was currently in an incomplete state where she could not manifest her omnipotence or full capabilities. At this moment in time, all that she was doing was possessing Pollux's consciousness and moving her body. That was exactly the reason why Terra and Luna were still alive. No, even the phrase possessing Pollux's consciousness was incorrect. In all likelihood, even the possession was not complete. It was like moving a chess piece on the board. It was a puppet-like state in which she was moved and made to speak her words. If Ruppaz was here, she would have described this situation as, something like moving a character on a TRPG. Capture them. Answering to Pollux's command, a countless number of dragons, which were on standby behind her, all accelerated at once. They were the many armies of dragons which had been hunted down by Ruppaz in the past. Those dragons were now given temporary bodies and were returned back to the world of the living. Each and every one of these dragons was a monster which possessed an exceptional amount of power. Although Terra might have been able to take on up to 5 of these enemies at once, anything more was too much for him. Adding on the fact that he would have to fight whilst covering for Luna, there was no chance for victory. He desperately dodged the pack of pursuing dragons and attempted to shake them off with an acrobatic flight. He fiercely hugged the snuggling existence within his arms that he had to protect so that it would not fall. If Terra was alone in this situation, he might have been able to take hold of his sword to slash the enemies away and keep them in check whilst running away. Of course, there was only about a 1% chance of such an outcome happening. Nevertheless, such a possibility existed. However, the current situation was too unfavorable. Even such a small possibility was extinguished. So you wish to be captured alongside that girl. Truly a.n.o. way that I favor, but that is a development that those on the hero's side should do. It is not something that you should be doing. Spoken from a stance far above them, it was a very unreasonable manner of speech. However, she had the right to speak from that position. She had that power. The Dragon King's 10 heads squirmed and faced Terra with their mouths open. What came out from each mouth were 10 shots of H.E.L. fire that would each be enough to destroy a city and still have power left over. I will have them hold back a little, so don't die, okay? Then, a giant flame landed on Terra's back. Are you sure it's in this direction? Yes. My sister's coming from this side of the city. A few minutes after Castor dashed out on his own. We were looking at the sky that extended far beyond the boundary of the city. According to what Castor had said, for some reason, the other half of the twins, the fairy princess, was sensed to be moving towards them on her own. Perhaps it was a synchronization which was only made possible because they were twins. Nevertheless, it did not seem like there was a mistake in what Castor had said. It was because I was also feeling a tingling sensation of something dangerous closing in on me. I took my GLA.S.SES off and took off the bandages that were hiding my wings. I also had Virgo stay back at the inn. In all likelihood, she would not be able to keep up with the battle which was about to happen from now on. Furthermore, I thought that it would be better to leave a skillful supporter in the town behind us, as it would allow us to fight properly without having to worry about what was happening behind us. As a side note, we had also left Dina behind. She had yet to come back from the toilet. Needless to say, the best case scenario would be for there to be no battle in the first place. If it turned into a stupid scene where I was just overly cautious and Pollux simply had some matter to talk about, it would be for the best. Therefore, I hoped to myself that I was merely overly cautious for no reason. To begin with, as she was one of the 12 heavenly stars, it was strange to think that there would even be a battle at all. However, I wondered why. Within myself, I felt a sense of conviction that things would not turn out that peacefully. I did not know whether my brain or my heart had my mind and which one had the soul. However, both of them were screaming, "Prepare for battle." The sensation that I felt was most likely the instinct of the real Ruppaz, which had been honed and polished through battles beyond my imagination. It would be the end of it all if I was to brush it off as just a feeling. Strangely, however, I had the utmost confidence in those unfounded feelings even though they had no substance to back it up. Furthermore, it was not just me. Aries, Libra, Agacaros, Scorpius, Carcinos, Sagittarius, and Castor had all already entered a battle-ready state as if to say, "Come at us from anywhere." Although we would be fighting back with almost our best lineup, I did not think that it would be excessive. It was because something inside me was giving off the highest degree of alarm. A battle that would happen in a moment would be a clash against an existence which Serpa.S. said the realm of Bennett Nash and Leon. Divine magic, Heliopause and Heliasphere. 3. I spread a divine power over Lajarn as if to cover it whole, deploying an anti-physical damage barrier. Heliopause was skill that created a barrier which could completely negate all physical damage under a certain value. It worked against enemies who dealt damage below that fixed threshold. However, its condition was up to total level and priest CLA.S.S level, x10. In other words, my Heliopause was unable to prevent damage that Serpa.S. set a value of 10,500. Although it seemed a little questionable, it was by no means unusable. Back in the game, there were magical beasts which could use a skill called Drink 10,000 needles and fire needles from all directions, each dealing a fixed damage of 10,004 in those situations. There was no divine magic which was more reliable than Heliasphere. Additionally, although it depended on the user's HP, if the damage dealt by Messerthem was less than 10,000, then it could even negate the damage dealt by Messerthem. Anyways, what I was trying to say was, I guess, it's a defensive measure that's better than nothing. Even though I had worded it that way, it should still be enough to prevent damage from any shockwaves during the upcoming battle. If it was directly attacked, it would easily shatter. However, in those situations, we would have to have Karkanos put in some effort. As for Heliasphere, I had already previously explained it, but as a reminder, it was an absolute anti-arcane magic barrier. This was deployed on the inner side of the Heliopause dome, thereby creating a barrier to prevent stray arcane magic. I digressed, but there actually existed an absolute anti-physical damage barrier in Xgate Online. Furthermore, I was able to use that skill. However, there was no skill nor divine magic that allowed me to grant that to all of my allies. To top it off, those types of absolute anti-whatever defensive skills were often breached by the enemies when they used defense penetration skills, therefore, it was often unexpectedly useless. When I first acquired those skills, I had a brief moment of happiness and shouted, with this, I'm invincible. However, I could not forget the feeling when it was easily breached by the enemy in the battle immediately afterwards. Sagittarius. Here. When I called Sagittarius, he shot an arrow towards me without any hesitation. I then grabbed the intangible arrow of light and activated a skill upon contact. Enchant Ray. 5 Enchant Ray, a buff that increased the attack and defense stats of a single ally. This was combined with Sagittarius's support skill called Acela.6. The effect of Askira was simple. It turned a single target skill, whether it be arcane or divine magic, into an area of effect skill. Needless to say, the potency of the skill dropped when compared to the original single target state. However, when considering the effort saved from having to cast it on each and every individual target, it was a convenient skill. Although, if you consider that some national RPGs allowed the player to switch the effect of the skill between single target and area of effect with a single press of an LB.U.T.ton, it was not a very strong skill 7. However, it was still convenient, nonetheless. I then threw the arrow that I was holding onto. When I did, the arrow divided into multiple pieces and pierced everyone present in that location, increasing their stats. Skill, Tegmine. 8 Karkanos also activated his skill, further increasing his already solid defense. Now then, with this, the preparation for the battle was somewhat completed for now. I crossed my arms together and awaited whatever was coming towards us. Subsequently, the first thing that appeared before us, after betraying our expectations, were a pair of demon couple. If I recall correctly, I saw him once at Blutgong, the so-called Demon King's son. Terra or something. And he's carrying a young girl and seems to be running away from something. His whole body's covered in wounds. He's in quite a miserable-looking state. Is he the cause of why my alarms are ringing inside of me? No, that's not right. I do indeed feel some kind of a threat from him, but it's not him. That seems to be the Demon King's son. Should I erase him? No, wait. Something seems a little strange. I stopped Agakeros, who was about to switch to attack mode the moment he saw their figures and decided to wait and see the situation. When we decided to do so, Terra and the girl crash-landed in front of us and the young girl in his arms fell to the ground. However, she did not have any significant wounds on her. It must have been because Terra had protected her with his life. Terra-sama. Terra-sama. The young girl was sobbing as she nudged Terra, but he did not respond. When I silently took a step forward in front of her, the young girl. If I recalled correctly, she was Luna of the Seven Luminaries? She came in front of me as if to cover for Terra. It was truly admirable. After all, she must have known that she had no chance of victory. As a way to test her, I glared at her lightly, at which point, the girl S.H.I+ veered in fear. However, she still did not show any intention of moving away. Please. I don't care what happens to me. But please let Terra-sama go. Ho? Aren't you asking for something that's too good to be true? I don't believe I have any obligation to help you out. I'll do anything you ask of me, so please. Did she just say that she'll do anything? Anyways, let's put aside those jokes for now. How should I go about this, I wonder? But whatever, for now, let's put aside how to deal with these two until later. It seemed like the cause of whatever was ringing the alarm inside of me was finally arriving. It flew right in front of us with frighteningly fast speed. What appeared in front of us in a flash as if it had warped out before us was a giant dragon. It was a monster which had 10 heads, but strangely, I felt a sense of familiarity from it. My brain taught me its name straight away. The Dragon King Laden, If I recalled correctly, he appeared during the special event hosted by the developers as a special magical beast that acted as the final boss. I also recalled that after it was defeated, it dropped many valuable alchemy materials and I used them to craft items like Amrita. And above that dragon stood a young girl with honey-colored hair. There would be no mistake in concluding that she was the fairy princess Pollux. Our eyes met each other and the fairy princess smiled warmly. I see, so you are that black-winged supreme ruler. I have heard about your misgivings even before now, however, this must be the first time we are conversing with each other. You are not Pollux, right? Correct. Although I have borrowed her body for a while, I am not her. Borrowing Pollux's mouth, something other than Pollux spoke. If it was the real Pollux, she would not say that it was our first time having a conversation after we reunited. In truth, it would be the first time for me, however, for her, it would not be the first encounter with Rapaz Maffel. As such, there was only one conclusion. Just as I was not the real Rapaz, she was also not the real Pollux. Furthermore, if you considered who would be able to pull off the stunt of being able to manipulate Pollux, the possibilities were limited. If my A.S. assumptions were correct, out of all the enemies that were currently against me, she would be my greatest enemy. I have always wanted to have a conversation with you once, but before that, let us have the extras get off the stage. 9 Pollux looked down at Terra and Luna and a full-body armored warrior climbed down from the dragon and approached the two of them. It was quite strong. By the looks of it, its level was around 750. The warrior raised its sword up, at which point, Luna covered Terra like as.h.I+eld. The warrior had no murderous intent. Its intention was most likely to amputate their limbs and capture them. I then took a step forward to cut in between the two parties before raising my arm to grab the blade being swung down with my bare hand. Position-wise, the two of them were in a hostile relations.h.I+p with me. Therefore, I did not have the obligation to help them, however, well, I felt that the two of them were different from the other demons that I had met up until this point. I suppose one could say that it was a bit too hasty to erase them right now. It would not be too late to listen to what they had to say later on and decide on a course of action after that. Young girl of the demon race. Do not forget what you said a moment ago. For now, I decided to sell them a favor as I strengthened the grip of the hand which was holding the blade. In any event, I never had any intentions of demanding anything weird of her in the first place. After all, I did not have a hobby of stealing someone else's partner 10 anyways, it was merely an idea that it might be useful later on if she owed us a favor. I shattered the sword with my grip alone and kicked away the surprised armored warrior. With just that action alone, a loud explosive sound was heard and its armor caved right in. Furthermore, another individual which was in its path was caught up as collateral and spiraled away into the distant horizon. Oh, so light. Rupa saves Terra and Luna Ilu.s. Tration from Volume 6 of Alba Light novel. I have to concur with you, someone who's not Pollux. We do indeed need the unneeded extras to get off the stage. You should p.i.s.s off. As I said that, I smiled belligerently, then activated the skill that I had only just recently acquired. Author note, the Dragon King Laden length, 170 weight, 180,000 metric tons level, 1000 attributes, fire x2 water x1 wood x1 metal x1 earth x2 moon x1 sun x2, each head has a different elemental attribute, HP, 500,000x10, each of the 10 heads have separate and independent HP. Historically, it was one of the 4 pillars which contended to be the strongest on Midgard and dominated a quarter of the land. Each head possessed an independent personality and could not be killed unless all of its heads were defeated. Furthermore, it had a ridiculously high regenerative ability, therefore, even when one of its heads was cut off, it would regenerate it back up after a short period of time. In other words, to defeat the Dragon King, one had to defeat all 10 of its heads before it could regenerate the defeated ones. Due to this special characteristic, it was believed to be impossible to subjugate him alone. As each of its heads did not have the same amount of HP as that of Leon's, a forceful and barbaric barrage of area of effect attacks was effective. However, as each of its heads had a different attribute, it was quite difficult to defeat all of them at once. Its personality was violent and cruel. Although each of its 10 heads had a different personality of its own, this point alone was universal. Needless to say, each of its individual heads was not weak. Even one head possessed enough power to contend against someone like Ares and Scorpius on more than an equal footing. Ordinarily, it was a monster that would not be strange to see as the last boss, but unfortunately, as this world was full of monsters, he was overshadowed somewhat. Furthermore, this time, as he was summoned whilst having his personality stolen away, he did not have the same majesty as he previously did. Author note end, __1 Laden, or, was a serpentine dragon that guarded the golden apples in the Garden of the Hesperides. According to Aristophanes, it had 100 heads. It was eventually killed by Heracles during his 11th labor. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Laden_. Mythology. 2. The Ra has the first heart written as, which is the word for heart, organ, and the second as, which is also heart, the intangible heart, in English, RIP English vocabulary. 3. Heliopause, heliosphere, 4. Drink 10,000 needles, is a reference to the J.A. Payne's variant of a pinky promise which included the saying, if you lie, you have to drink 1,000 needles. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/pinky_swear. Originally translated as will drink 10,000 needles, and the name of the skill reminded me of Dizzy from Guilty Gear with ridiculous skill names. I used this to catch fish, for searing cod, I used this to pick fruit, for roasting chestnuts, etc. 5. Enchant Ray, 6. Acela, also called Zeta Sagittarii, is the third brightest star in the constellation of Sagittarius. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Zeta_Sagittarii. 7. Not sure which game the author is referring to. 8. Tegmine. Okay, so, the author wrote, but ia.s.sum it's just a typo since the effect of the skill is the same as Tegmine which was previously used. The rest of this chapter, Ra, looks like it's barely edited with how hard it is to read. So ia.s.sum the author was just trying to keep up with the deadline and made a small mistake. 9. Alovenus speaks in a very clean and polite language. Oftentimes she speaks in a position equal to the listener, but at times she places herself in a position higher than others. Positional writing, or whatever it's actually called, is not really a thing in English, but it's quite important in J.A. Payne's. Think of the way she speaks as, maybe, 1. A lawyer and a judge speaking to each other in a courtroom, though not that stiff, or 2. Two countries' diplomats speaking to each other respectfully. For example, she might say you shall do this instead of you should do this. In English she would probably say do not slash it is instead of don't slash it's, and she refers to Rupas as Kijo, which would be something like N.O.Blee lady or milady. In earlier chapters, when 12 heavenly stars used Kijo, it was translated as milady. Kijo is a term that you might see in some Imperial Palace-ish series when a D.U.C.H.S refers to another D.U.C.H.S. It's not really important for English readers since they all end up as you anyways, but I actually see it as relevant to the story later on, which unfortunately won't be properly conveyed because I can't translate it to the same effect, hence this footnote. 10. We're going PG rating guys X, I went soft but, the raw is nettery. If you know what it is, you know what it is. If you don't, well, be good and stay innocent. Also, if you didn't figure it out at the time, the joke that Rupas referred to a few paragraphs above is related to this. __. Chapter 129, Pollux used the 7 Heroes Raw link, October 31, 2016, Translator, Tumorfreethoughts/TPSTT, November 26, 2019, Editor 1, Hand of Vecna, December 12, 2019, Editor 2, Key, December 12, 2019, Translation link, _________, TLN, reminder that I/my/me with or is MC Rupas and I/my/me with yo is the real Rupas, the skill the one who left first, Alcade. I would say that it was a skill that should never have come into existence in this world in the first place. It was only natural. After all, that skill was bugged. The reason was because it shattered the level 1000 ceiling set by the creation G.O.Dis. By using the skill that I gained, that I recalled during the battle against Bennett Nash, I was able to Serpa.S level 1000 and fly into the realm beyond. My sensations were enhanced and my consciousness became warlike. I entered a state where hurting others arose no response from me, making my thoughts more violent. I became less of me, and turned more into me, yo. 1 Unfortunately, as expected, I was not able to ascend as high as I previously had and my level stopped increasing once it reached level 1500. It was a lot lower than I was expecting it to be, however, it was still enough for this situation. After all, the 12 stars levels would also jump up when my level went up. The only one to not have her level increased was Libra. Nevertheless, she had her very own method of powering up. Armament selection. Astrea. Libra's additional armament was ejected from Blutgong and came flying towards her. It then undertook a docking process with Libra midair too. With this, Libra was fully armored and everyone else was level 1000. The enemies that we were opposing were between levels 700 to 1000, numbering at a few hundred units. If the Dragon King was also considered in the calculations, the enemy's fighting prowess was so astronomical that it was not even funny. Or at least, that's how ordinary people would probably think. But I would be troubled if you were to underestimate us. The tyrannical 12 stars were a bunch of the strongest individuals that I, specifically gathered for the purpose of challenging the G.O.Dis 3. I did not include anyone that wouldn't be able to prevail through this small disadvantage. True, if one were to only add up the numerical value of each side's levels, then the difference between the two was quite significant. After all, even if one were to include me, our side would only be at 7,600. In comparison, the sum of the opposing sides' levels would easily Serpa.S a few hundred thousand. But how unfortunate for them. Our side's combat power is not additive but multiplicative. Now that I, had regained a fragment of my power, the 12 stars were finally able to display their serious side. Looking back retrospectively, I did feel sorry for them up until now. Because I was so worthless until now, they were forced to fight while being restricted. But now, there's no need to worry about that anymore. Their chains have already been undone. Therefore, I command the tyrannical stars that obey me. Now is the time to show me your full ability and entertain me. Argonautai? It would be a different story if the elites that had served me 200 years ago had been summoned, but since Alovinus feared a rebellion and summoned only the average heroes, it's nothing more than a mishmash gathering of individuals. It seemed like the ones that had been obeying the 7 heroes came out, but don't make me laugh. These guys were not even worth counting as part of the enemy's number. I had heard that it had been said down that they combined their power to defeat me, but that's completely and utterly wrong. The truth was that they're nothing but a bunch of cowards that stood far, far away in the back and provided supporting fire. They were a bunch of terrified weaklings who pushed the role of directly fighting me onto Alioth and the rest whilst they themselves stood at a safe distance and attacked timidly. What happened to them in the end again? Ah, I remember now. If I recall correctly, because they were such an eyesore, I ended up incinerating the whole bunch. Your feet are shaking, heroes. Even after death, you can't forget your fear towards me, what did why? Ah, by the way, you lot, who are you again? I can't recall your lot's faces or names at all. Forgive me, all right? You see, I have a bird brain where I forget the faces of the people that leave no impression on me after 3 steps. Yo. Why? After I ridiculed them, the heroes' faces warped in anger and shame. Well, I suppose that should be enough for provocation. I mean, although I said that, it's actually a fact that I could not recall their individual faces. Truthfully, they were not worthy enough for me to remember them. In the end, they're just a pack of small fries who raised only their levels with the golden apples. Did they really think that after being defeated by me 200 years ago, if they showed up this late in time with their lingering attachments and made a small clique, they would be able to win against me? Nothing would change just because they came back from the realm of the dead. It's a promised feature that reanimated apparitions would be weaker. Here, quickly scram. Skill, X coalesce. 4 Needless to say, when it came to being able to do things that I previously was unable to, I was also the same. There were also a number of skills that I previously was not able to use because I did not fulfill the prerequisite for them. Let us unveil the destructive power of one such skill, X coalesce. The usage prerequisite for this skill was that the user must be over level 200 in both the Monster Tamer and Alchemist CLA.S.SES. And the effect of this skill was a fusion of skills. For example, let us assume there were 2 skills and they were both activated at the same time. One would stun the enemy upon a critical hit, while the other would always inflict a critical hit. The final result would be that the skill's effect would be changed to always stun the enemy. Originally, it was a skill where the Tamer and the Magical Beast skills would be merged together. However, there was no such restriction in this world. Back in the game, this skills feature would only trigger upon a limited pre-programmed number of combinations. However, that was also irrelevant in this world. If I thought that it would work, then it would work. I couldn't care less about the restrictions as specified by the G.O.dis, nor do I have an obligation to follow them. I determine the rules that I have to abide by. Observe carefully with your own 2 eyes, the powers of the 12 stars who are finally at the realm they should be. Okay, Alovenus? The moment they received Rupaz's orders, the 12 stars all charged in. Their whole bodies were overflowing with power whilst their master's voice pushed their backs. We might lose. They did not think even for a moment in that way. They had nothing but conviction for their upcoming victory. It was because, behind them stood the absolute existence, the Black-Winged Supreme Ruler. And she had commanded them to show their full power and entertain her. If they could not even answer that expectation, what a joke the T.I.Tle of the 12 stars would be. What a joke it would be to claim to be her subordinates. In front of the enemy forces which numbered many times their own number, Ares and the rest all activated their signature skills without any hesitation whatsoever. Let's go, Libra, Scorpius. Don't order this mistress around. I'll match with you. Sagittarius roared, and to him, Scorpius and Libra responded. In that brief moment, the heroes who were opposing them must have seen it clearly. Brightly lit stars forming the constellations of the Archer, the Scale, and the Scorpion behind the 3 of them. And those constellations overlapping each other for an instant. Fly. First, Sagittarius fired his arrow, which was grabbed by Libra as it teleported to the middle of the enemy lines. Matching the brief moment the enemy's attention was pulled away by Libra, Scorpius released her venomous breath, Graphias, covering everyone including Libra with her poison 5. However, this attack did not have any effect on Libra. It was only natural, after all. Libra was a golem and not an organic being to begin with. All the heroes, who were inflicted with the poison, were then enclosed by a field of light. What was fired upon them was a blast from the scale. A destructive light which did not permit the weak to even bear with it. The name of the skill was Brachium. 6. It was a grand opening initiated by a largest-scaled annihilation skill being used. In the face of the 12 stars' strongest firepower, all enemies with less than 99,999 HP were exterminated without question. Absolute defense skills were irrelevant. Absolute evasion skills were not permitted. This radiance of destruction was the signature attack of the Guardian of the Sanctuary. It had a higher priority than any other skills and penetrated through any defense. It was a first CLA.S.S skill. It dealt a fixed damage of 99,999 at all times and could not be mitigated by any means. With just that attack, the originally countless number of Argonauti were reduced to where only about 20% of them remained. However, even though the attack had ended, there was no time for them to relax and collect themselves. Agakeros. We're going in, Ares. This time, Ares and Agakeros stood together as if they were protecting each other's back, overlapping the ram and goat constellations atop each other. What was being released from Ares's back was a rainbow-colored flame. Those flames were entangled by Agakeros's black waves, turning into a black flame and dispersing into the surroundings. The effect of this skill was a combination of continuous % damage as long as the flames persisted and a curse which rendered the damage unhealable on ones affected. In other words, not only did this flame penetrate the enemy's defense, thus able to deal damage upon any enemy, it did not even permit the enemy to heal themselves. This was essentially equivalent to destroying the enemy's maximum HP. Meanwhile, the heroes which were affected by the flames started dropping one after another. What are you doing? There are only a few enemies, you know. Get on them. Drown them with numbers. The heroes did not just take the beating without doing anything back. A bunch of dragons, which were historically known as the strongest race, used their breath attacks whilst the level 1000 sword masters used their SLAs.H.I plus NG attacks which could even crack the ground apart. However, what stood in front of them to block their attacks was the 12 stars wall, Karkinos. He used the skill covering to pull in all attacks, stopping them by himself, before proceeding to smile evilly. 7 Welcome to H.E.L.L. Sagittarius, are your preparations done? Leave it to me. Sagittarius activated the Acela skill and endowed it upon Karkinos 8 at the same time. The constellation of the crab and the archer overlapped with one another, causing the reflecting shot to multiply and reflect back on all enemies, including the ones that had not attacked him. A Cuben's extension. 9 Karkinos multiplied and reflected back the received attacks on all of his enemies. Originally, Karkinos could only attack at a melee distance. However, after receiving Rapaz's push and being enhanced by Sagittarius's attack, he no longer had such a restriction. Karkinos swung his pincers widely, releasing many rays of light that further fragmented into arrows of light, overrunning the enemy camp. After this unreasonable attack, the number of heroes was further culled down, yet the nightmare had not yet ended for them. After all, the party had just begun. Match with me properly, Karkinos. Okay. Scorpius and Karkinos both readied their pincers simultaneously and proceeded to attack a dragon. What happened next was a storm of superfast slash attacks. Stemming from the fact that both of them used the same weapon, they must have nicely complemented and matched with each other. The dragon, which was supposed to have hard scales, was shredded in an instant, turning into miserable pieces of meat. Sagittarius, provide support. I figured it was coming, so I was preparing for it. The next constellations to cross were the scale and the archer. Libra opened all of her gun ports and Sagittarius prepared his bow. Then it was fired. A blizzard of arrows and destructive lights. Due to the effect of the skill Acela, the destructive lights and arrows scattered then branched out. Several tens of thousands of shots burned away at everything in their path. Agakeros. Acknowledged. Castor stabbed his beloved anchor lance into the ground, causing a tornado to rise up. Against all the heroes who were sucked up into the air by the tornado, rays of light came down from above and penetrated them. Yet it still was not the end. Just before they landed back down onto the ground, Ares turned into a giant CLUS-tur of flames and charged into them, denying them from even landing back down and launching them back up into the air. Following this, Ares fired flames from his palms, took flight, and started to kick one enemy after another by repeating the former process. Finally, when the enemies landed back down, there were Libra, Sagittarius, Scorpius, Castor, and Agacharos on standby waiting for them. We will be attacking simultaneously. Is everyone ready? Who do you think you're talking to? I'll turn you into a piece of scr.a.p if you want. Match my timing. Let's clean them up all at the same time. Libra opened her gun ports and Scorpius breathed in deeply. Agacharos' eyes shone and Castor raised his anchor up. Ares intensified his flames and Sagittarius readied his bow. And when all of those were simultaneously fired, even the heroes who were already long dead felt their impending deaths. Full fire. Graphias. Deneb G.O.D who possesses 50 names. 10 Messertham version 3. Al-Nassel. The 6 attacks mixed and fused with one another due to Rupas's skill, turning into a certain hit aurora attack that penetrated the enemy camp. Meanwhile, Krebsan, who could not initiate an attack on his own, was lacking a role to play during this crucial moment. Therefore, for now, he decided to throw a pincer at the enemy. Once that ray of light had finished passing through, there were no longer any heroic spirits left. The only ones left were the Dragon King and the Fairy Princess who rode on it. Notwithstanding this situation, her composure had not diminished. When the Fairy Princess snapped her fingers, all the heroic spirits which were just defeated a moment ago came back to life and then stood in front of the 12 stars once again. However, seeing this, Rupas sneered. This time, it's my turn to show off. After saying this, she moved her fingers. When she did, the heroic spirits, who were just brought to life, rose up into the air at once. Without even able to resist, powerful telekinesis pulled them up and trapped them mid-air. Rupas then held her hand up, gathering mana which shone in a golden color next to her. What it formed was a bow which shone in a golden color like a sundae. However, as the size of the bow was ridiculously big, there might be a reason to wonder whether there existed an arrow which could be used with it. But it did not necessarily have that an arrow which had to go with this. After all, the effect of this skill was quite surprising in that, even though it's the biggest arcane magic within its attribute, it's actually not a skill which directly attacked the enemy but instead, could be categorized as a support type. Its effect multiplied the power of the next magic activated by a few times. In other words, what should be used with this bow was arcane magic. And the rate of the multiplier was determined by the time spent until the activation of the next skill. Profit with the golden bow. And burn them all, solar flare. 11 Upon Rupas's invocation of the skill, an offensive arcane magic, which was in the upper ranks in terms of destructive power and temperature even amongst the sun attribute skills, was released. A small-scale golden-colored sun swallowed up the heroic spirits, said through the stratosphere in a flash and flew far away into empty s.p.a.ce beyond. The speed at which it traveled said even the speed of light as it forcibly sent away all the enemies caught up in it to the far end of the solar system. No, that was not all that it did. The solar flare, which was fired, was enhanced by the prophet with the golden bow such that even that was amplified. This monstrous skill's diameter said 100 m, its said 1 km, its said 10 km and even said 100 km. Although it did not reach the extent of the real sun, it possessed overwhelming heat and gravity, becoming a small-scaled planet-sized pseudostar. A countless number of natural satellites, comets, and planets in its path were destroyed and pulled apart and eventually, after escaping the solar system and traveling further beyond into faraway s.p.a.ce, exploded. Even if they were the Argonautai, after getting hit by such an attack, they were unable to survive. Solar flare alone had already vaporized many of them, yet there was the added effect of being carried far into S.P.A.ce and being caught up in a small-scale sun's explosion at the end. There were a few brave individuals who had an HP Serpa.S.Sing the value of 99,999. In fact, out of the dragon race, 90% of them had an HP stat Serpa.S.Sing 100,000. But even still, they were erased by a single attack. Now then, haven't you had enough, G.O.Dis? No matter how many enemies you gather, you wouldn't be able to defeat me, you know. I suppose that is indeed so. Seriously, you really are such an astounding monster. To even be able to ignore the damage cap, what kind of logic is this? What the G.O.Dis had just said was exactly the correct response to the unreasonable event that had just taken place. Exactly, Ruppaz, who had activated Alkaid, was able to ignore the maximum limit of damage one could deal at once. In the G.O.Dis's eyes, she was able to clearly see the several hundreds of thousands of damage dealt to the heroic spirits in numerical values. Notwithstanding that, her relaxed composure did not collapse. She had a reason why it did not need to collapse away. However, I hope you haven't forgotten? There existed heroes that managed to defeat even you. Pollux smiled warmly and proceeded to summon once again. But this time, what she summoned were not ordinary soldiers like the previous times. They were the 4 stars that rivaled even Ruppaz in terms of brightness. They possessed a reputation which was in line with that of the vampire princess. They were the strongest of heroes in history, who had managed to put a stop to the supreme ruler's ambitions 200 years ago. First to appear was a peerless warrior who was clad in armor. He had mastered all sorts of sword skills such that when it came to the ability to handle the sword, he was reputed to even Serpa.S. Ruppaz. He was the Sword King, Alioth. The next to rise up was a giant bear beastkin, Dubhi, whose body was enveloped in white hair. The third was an individual in full body armor known to be Midgard's greatest alchemist, Mizar. The last to appear was a small-framed individual known as the Adventure King, Fekta, who possessed a battle prowess contrary to his small appearance. All 4 of them were formerly known as part of the 7 heroes. They returned to the land of the living once more and pointed their sword tips at Ruppaz. Ruppaz 7 Heroes Pollux Ilu.S. Tration from Volume 6. Of Alba Light Novel __. Author note, Mizar, mine is an axe, you know. Dubhi, bare-handed bear. Fekta, it's actually a bow and arrow. Incorrect, they returned to the land of the living once more and pointed their sword tips at Ruppaz. Correct, they returned to the land of the living once more and only Alioth pointed his sword tip at Ruppaz. Alioth, can you stop doing things like that already? It looks like I'm the only fool that's being control-led. The one who left first, Alkaid, an original skill that did not exist back in Xgate Online, can also be used by Bennett Nash. By breaking past the level 1000 cap set by the G.O.Dis, the maximum limit of the level becomes infinity, thereby allowing the user to display their true battle prowess which was previously suppressed by the system. Furthermore, due to the activation of the skill, the upper limit of the damage dealt shoots up, therefore it becomes possible to deal up to 999 damage. However, the damage of the real Ruppaz in her prime was not this measly. Originally, it was a skill which would allow the user to bring about 100% of their power. However, because the all-important Ruppaz had forgotten her real full power, she only increased up to level 1500. If she unleashes her full power, she will increase to above 4000. In other words, even right now, she is still completely leagues away from her prime. What is wrong with this monster? Although this is irrelevant, 200 years ago, this skill did not have a name. It only gained the name Alkaid after the battle with Bennett. In respect to Bennett Nash, Ruppaz named it Alkaid, which is another name for Eta Ursae Majoris of the Ursa Major, Big Dipper asterism. Demerit, it destroys the world system and overcomes any existing boundaries, therefore, it places quite a significant burden on the world. Using game-related terms, it would be something like one person using so much data that it starts lagging in one go. Author note end, __1 from this point onwards, I/my/me is written with yo. 2 TP, but Blutgong is not even close. So the author didn't account for Astrea to travel to Libra, either that, or it teleports ex-Vecna. Yes, it's basically Gundam Seed, where they shoot out dockable parts from the mother S.H.I+P, even though it's nowhere near the Gundam. Blutgong is nowhere near here. 3 Since above, it's the real Ruppas that's narrating. Also, the author's inconsistency with naming the 12 heavenly stars is driving me crazy. 4x Coalesce, 5 Venomous Breath, Graphias, 6 Brachium, 7 Covering, 8 Acella, 9 Acubens Extension, 10 G.O.D who possesses 50 names, is possibly a reference to Marduk who was mentioned in Enuma Elish as having 50 names. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Marduk. 11 Solar Flare, Prophet with the Golden Bow, is possibly a reference to the Greek G.O.D Apollo, who has a golden bow and is a.s. associated with prophecies. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Apollo. ___. Chapter 130, Alioth used Swords Dance 1 Raw link, November 6, 2016, translator, Tumorfreethoughts/TPSTT, December 3, 2019, editor 1, Hand of Vecna, December 21, 2019, editor 2, Key, December 24, 2019, translation link, ___ Merry Christmas everyone. Here is a bonus chapter for you. Author note, the story up until now Sagittarius, because Master's strongest arcane magic is about, the value of my existence is disappearing at a superfast speed. If it's like this, Ruppas-sama might as well take the T.I.Tle of the archer? Wait. If that's the case, what's going to become of me? The Supreme Ruler's seat that became empty? I am, the Black-Winged Supreme Ruler. I am actually Ruppas-sama, all this time. Libra, he's taken quite ma.s.civ damage it seems. Author note end, __, this whole chapter's I/my/me is written, in kanji, as yo and first time it appears, it is superscript with or. Interpret that how you will. You lot are. At that moment, I, yo and or, was feeling surprised and nostalgic. The 4 men that stood in front of me were a human, a beastkin, a hobbit and a dwarf respectively. Even though I should not have known the appearances of the people who were pointing their weapons at me, the Ruppas inside of me registered that she knew of them. At the same time, I felt a wave of burning anger. I quickly regained my composure and held back my anger, however, just by seeing their appearances, I ended up clenching my fist tightly. I was not particularly angry about the fact that I was defeated by them. I was also not feeling resentful towards them. But, why was it? Why? Just by seeing their miserable appearances, I was overflowing with fury. Why was it that, just by seeing their appearances of being controlled along with their empty eyes, I was feeling this disheartened? Tisk. After kicking the ground away, the swordsman, Alioth, stepped in front of me in a flash. Ruppas received the sword he swung down with her bare hand using knife hand strike. However, the blade ate into her hand causing blood to start overflowing from the cut to Tisk. I guess it's to be expected of someone who is called the Sword King by others. It cut quite nicely. I moved my arm away to deflect the sword, plucked a single feather out of my black wings then threw it as if to stab at Alioth's eyes. Subsequently, I backstepped once to create some distance between us then treated the wound on my hand. Meanwhile, Alioth also pulled out the feather from his eye as if nothing serious had happened and regenerated the wound in his eye. I was wondering who it was going to be, but it's just a bunch of despicable traitors. I see, you're going to oppose Ruppas-sama again? Not just once, but for the second time. I'll kill you, kill. After screaming in a fit of anger, the one who slid past me to charge at the heroes was Scorpius. No, it was not just her. With rage-filled expressions, Ares and Agakeros also charged towards Fekta, Dubhi and Mizar respectively. Not good, their coordination has collapsed. Calm down, you lot. You're moving exactly how they want you to. Phew, it is a reversal of the situation. Pollux smiled as if to ridicule my agitation whilst Alioth jumped in to attack me. Although I managed to dodge his attack, this time, one of the Dragon King's heads opened its mouth to try and swallow me whole. I somehow managed to avoid that attack in the last second as well, but the Dragon King had more than one head. The other 9 remaining heads simultaneously breathed out breath attacks which engulfed me. Needless to say, I had no obligation to take that attack like a sitting duck. I folded my wings like I was covering myself, then opened them quickly in one go. From that action, a strong wind pressure blew the breath attack away, during which I charged in to slash at the Dragon King. However, the immediate moment before my attack hit the Dragon King, Alioth stepped in between us, managing to stop my attack. I suppose this situation is really not in my favor. Even in my current state with Alkaid activated, to fight against the Dragon King and Alioth who are both being backed by the G.O.Dis is quite tough. Rupa-sama. Now. I need to have you guys continue to fight against them. Libra and the rest are not available, as expected. They have their hands full against the Argonauti. If anything, they should be the ones who really need the help since they're up against that many enemies. Then there's only one hand that I can play. I have no option but to quickly take care of the Dragon King and Alioth. I strongly flapped my wings and positioned myself to Alioth's flank before trying to aim at his neck with a claw attack. However, in that instant, I saw an old memory where Rupas and Alioth were enjoying their time together and telling each other their dreams. Tisk. After missing the best opportunity that I had, I could only cease the attack and create some distance between us. S.H.I+T, what was that just now? For a moment, it was as if my body hesitated to kill Alioth. No, perhaps it was exactly just that. Yo and Or, can say this exactly because we've already merged quite a lot, but Rupa seems to be someone who's extremely nice and easygoing to those who are close to her. You could say that she's deeply compa.s.cyanate or sentimental. In all likelihood, it's due to her not being able to ever receive love from her father when she was still young. Once she registers someone as close to her, she pampers them to no end and lets slide most of their mischievous deeds. That's why she can't help but subconsciously hesitate for an instant when I'm about to attack. And in a battle at this level, that moment of hesitation is fatal. It becomes a ma.s.civ opportunity. In our battles, slipping the opponent the slightest moment of hesitation equates to unequivocally giving the enemy player one free turn in gaming terms. This might be quite bad. It is just like that time. Even though you can win if you fight seriously, you are unable to give it your all. It can even be called the one and only weakness that you have. Apparently so. In response to Pollux's words, I unconsciously showed a self-ridiculing smile. Really, I didn't think that I would have such a dumb weakness. To not know myself is quite a big handicap, isn't it? Thanks to that, one of my shortcomings had to surface at a critical time like this. I didn't know that I was weak against someone that I had become attached to. If there was a significant difference in our abilities, there wouldn't really be an issue, but Alioth is not a random small fry rup-hey.s.sssss. This time, the Dragon King came charging at me whilst calling me with a deeply resentful voice. You still feel resentment towards me even though you no longer retain your own psyche, eh? What a troublesome guy you are. It was definitely something when a 170m long body charged at me. However, it was not at the level where I could not stop it. I was forced backwards as I pushed against the Dragon King's head. Although the ground below me was shaved away by this, the Dragon King's charge itself was halted. Rupa's punch Dragon Ilyu.s.tration, reused, from Alba Light novel. Ilyu.s.tration used previously in Volume 4. Goo. Oh. Subsequently, I strengthened the grip on one of my hands and took hold of the Dragon King's horn. Then, using nothing but pure physical force, I spun him around in a circle and launched him into the air. However, the Dragon King stopped himself in midair and countered by firing breath attacks at me from all 10 of his mouths. The breath attacks mixed with each other to form a single ray which then came pouring towards my direction. Dodge? No, I can't. If something like that hits the ground directly, Midgard will be destroyed. Even assuming it doesn't get destroyed, it'll no doubt erase the whole of the humanoid's domain. Gyuuo. I clenched my fist tightly and directly punched the breath attack from the front. The Dragon King dodged the reflected breath attack, whilst the chunk of energy that combined 7 different attributes disappeared into the horizon far away. Although the calamity was somehow avoided, it was as impactful as I had expected. The skin on my hands was burnt away and blood was gus.h.I+ng out of it. I would be able to fully recover if I were to use a recovery skill. Furthermore, it was not the time to be worrying about the pain. Nevertheless, even a.s. summing that it was a makes.h.I plus foot 1, to think that this fist that had managed to shatter a meteorite and was still left unscathed would be hurt. It hurts my self-confidence a little bit, you know? Hey. In any event, there was no time to be daydreaming. That was because, this time, Aelioth closed the distance and swung his sword down from above. I avoided his sword and opened an X-gate, taking out the whip sword that I regularly used. Using my beloved sword, I stopped Aelioth's slash attack, then proceeded to counterattack with the blade. Consecutive attack skill, Quick Raid. I unleashed a storm of slashes at Aelioth using a skill which prioritized speed at its foremost. It was a skill where in exchange for a lowered attack power in its individual strikes, the gaps in its motions were reduced. If utilized well, the skill allowed the user to continuously hit the enemy. But strangely, the skill that Aelioth activated was also exactly the same. The many sword slashes that we both unleashed clashed with each other's, generating a gravitational field between us due to their power and the sheer number of slashes. But mine are superior in both power and speed. So I can force my way through. Exactly. I should be able to force it through, so don't think about the olden times. Even though I know that things like the smiles from bygone days only make the sword that I'm holding dull, it's just stuck in my head and won't go away. Gyu. The one who was forced back, in the end, was me. I was pushed back by Aelioth's sword slashes and my sword and my whole body were blown away. And to that scene, as if to deal a follow-up finus.h.I+ng blow, the Dragon King's foot closed in on me from the top. I quickly crossed my arms in front of me in the last second to receive the attack. However, in the face of its great impact, the ground below me caved in. My arms were fine. They did not end up breaking. But the position and the posture that I was in was bad. If one were to ask me what was so bad about it, it was that my movements were completely restricted, so the fact that I would not be able to prevent Aelioth's next attack was what was bad above all else. Oh. Aelioth pulled his sword up and closed in on me. If I were to receive this upcoming attack, even I would not be able to get away without receiving a severe wound. As that was the case, I could only switch to priorities preventing his attack whilst allowing myself to take damage from the Dragon King's stomping attack. I still had some leeway with how much HP I had left. Although it would be quite detrimental, it would not be fatal. Okay. I'll match the timing and somehow, at that precise moment, something blew the Dragon King away, then, without losing any momentum, stepped in between me and Aelioth and stopped his sword slash with their bare hands. Huh. That was exactly what you would call the flash of a moment. The instant I registered that I saw a silvery S.H.I plus New York thing PAS.S before me, it was there in front of me. The hair which was fluttering was silver in color. The robe that it wore was jet black. Its skin was as white as fresh snow, yet its height could by no means be called tall. However, the appearance of it stopping Aelioth's sword by pinching them using 2 fingertips and without any effort made it seem extremely big in my eyes. Muffle, what exactly are you doing? After winning against me, how could you be having a hard time against some spirits of the past? The color of the eyes that turned back to look towards me was crimson. Fangs protruded from the openings of her mouth and her face overflowed with absolute confidence in respect to her own abilities. She sent Aelioth flying away with a kick just as if she was kicking away a small pebble on the side of the road, then stared daggers at me. I believe I've already told you that if there ever comes a time you're to be defeated by someone else, I'll come punching you even if I have to come back from the land of the dead. The one who will kill you is me, the vampire princess Bennett Nash. Don't ever forget that. She was the high-strung vampire princess who even swatted away the G.O.Dis's invitation. And right now, she was standing right in front of me looking the same as ever. Vampire Princess Illu.S. Tration from Alba light novel, Bennett Nash * Ares was locked in the middle of a struggling battle. From the very beginning, his status was not high. After all, even if he had been pulled up to level 1000, his enemy was the Beast King Dubhe, who was one of the 7 heroes that were said to rival even Ruppas if they were to be of the same level. The beast without an ego of its own was showing the whites of its eyes and whilst drooling, was going berserk with its wild animalistic nature in full effect. Bear. It was a series of attacks which relied heavily on his beastly strength. Notwithstanding that, they were not attacks that relied entirely on raw power. As he was half man half beast, his attacks were accompanied by a proper form. Nevertheless, Ares also did not have the intention to run away. Even if he could forgive everyone else, the 7 heroes alone were people that he could not forgive. He could not forget about the fact that even though they had his master's trust, they ended up betraying her. Hey! Ares and Dubhe's arms and legs repeatedly clashed with each other at a high speed, creating small fireworks upon impact which spilled over into the surroundings. Fist strike, backhand strike, elbow strike, knee kick, spinning kick, a high-speed melee battle occurred between the two of them, both being inflicted with damage. Needless to say, Messertham was being used. Just by being in close proximity to each other like how they currently were, Dubhe was no doubt taking continuous damage and suffering burns all over his body. But Dubhe swung his claws around as if he did not even notice that fact, managing to carve a wound on Ares's body. Beaa. Ares crouched down to avoid Dubhe's strong arms and swept at Dubhe's legs. When Dubhe lost his footing and became unstable, Ares kicked him upwards then flew into the air himself to give chase. Ares flew past the flying Dubhe then spun around. Using his fire-enveloped leg like a whip, he executed an axe kick onto Dubhe. However, a moment before the attack landed, Dubhe disappeared from the spot then instantly appeared behind Ares, launching Ares away with a kick of his own. Gah! Ares crashed into the ground, yet he did not stop there. The momentum continued to push him further, drilling a deep hole into the earth. Nevertheless, Ares quickly pulled himself together and as if he had swum through the ground, popped up behind Dubhe who had landed back down on the ground. Ares then grabbed the back of Dubhe's head who had failed to react to Ares's sudden appearance and slammed it down. However, using his fearsome strength, Dubhe forcibly stood back up before flipping his body backwards to sandwich Ares between himself and the ground. The ground below them shattered and blood dripped down from Ares's mouth. But this time, it was Ares's turn to commence a counterattack. In retaliation to Dubhe, Ares landed multiple kicks on his back. So this time, it was Dubhe's turn to leak blood out from his mouth. Despite the circuit-misdances, he immediately threw Ares away with a shoulder throw. Although Ares tried to quickly get back up, Dubhe's foot stumped on Ares, causing a dull sound. Then a second time, a third time, a fourth time. With an impact strength high enough to cave the ground below them with each stomp, Ares's resistance gradually got weaker and weaker. Then in came the fifth stomp as a -H.I+NG blow. In a dazed state, Ares could only watch/look on as Dubhe's foot came down on him. However, in the next moment, Dubhe was sent flying out of his field of vision. Correction, he was punched away. The back of the person who came into Ares's view belonged to a bulky and muscular large man. His hair was a deep dark red and his body was enveloped in a black bodysuit. His Ma.S.Civ log-like arms were bulging with veins, whilst he himself was emitting, without any attempt to hide it, an animalistic nature that was even greater than Dubhe's. Yo, aren't ya having a sad and pitiful fight? Ares. The name of the one who stood in front of Ares and mocked him. The tyrannical 12 stars, Leon of the Lion. __, author note, Miracle Carnival has commenced chapter 130 author note Illu.S. Tration from Alba chapter 130 raw. I just screenshot it because I don't feel like formatting this. This battlefield had lined up Ruppas, Pollux, possessed by the G.O.Dis, the Dragon King, Alioth, Fekta, Dubhe, and Mizar. If I don't A.S. Semble them now, when else should I A.S. Semble them? Let's chuck Bennett, Nash and Leon in there too. Overwhelming battle prowess. Fight with each other, fight with each other. All of you high-level peeps. People of Lajarn, don't fight near us. SEI, individually, they're already crazy dangerous, and now, they're all gathered together. Amazed face, author note end, ___1. 2 knife hand strike.